Welcome back. You're watching Invest Africa, and still with me in studio to unpack this week's topic is Keith Brebnor. He's director at the Johannesburg Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and also with us, Martyn Davies, CEO of Frontier Advisory. Gentlemen, let's get back into this conversation because you alluded to it a little earlier, Martyn, looking at sustainable growth in a province like Gauteng, in a city like Johannesburg, and a lot of that being attributed to the fact that we're looking at a very diverse range of sectors where we have exposure to. We've got financial and business services, retail and wholesale trade, community and social services, manufacturing. There's a bit of mining in that mix as well. And the city of Johannesburg has highlighted that it's looking at broadening that to more modern sectors as well. Information technology, telecommunications, film and media. The list is extensive. Mm-hmm. Just how much confidence does it ignite?
Well, again, Johannesburg up until now has been that default catch-all sort of economic engine room, and we remain to be that. But for me, it's, if you're looking at successful cities or successful economies in the last 2-3 decades, particularly from developing emerging market economies, the successful ones have been those that have been able to successfully and well implemented clusters. Mm-hmm. This goes back to Michael Porter from Harvard Business School theory around clustering for competitiveness. So, for example, what clusters do we have firstly in the country first, and what do we have in Johannesburg? Clusters, we have automotive clusters, we have agribusiness clusters, we have an asset management cluster in Cape Town, advertising cluster. What are the clusters in Johannesburg? Well, we have I think from a sort of logistics cluster, undoubtedly, on the East Rand around OR Tambo Airport, perhaps Kasoni as well, the sort of so-called dry port. We have a financial services, world-class, world-leading financial services, banking, capital markets cluster. We have a lot of the, as mentioned earlier, maybe it's not so much a cluster, but we have a congregation, if you will, a collection of leading multinational companies here. We also have a cluster we have world-class leading business schools. Wits Business School's up the road, Henny Business School is here. So more importantly, rather than having an extensive list of let's try and do everything, maybe we should try and rather join the existing dots we have and make the functionality of what we have better to support our key priorities around these clusters.
Your comment, Keith, on clustering for competitiveness, that's a very catchy phrase, that.
It is a very catchy phrase. I think one thing that's missing from your list of major contributors to GDP is trade. We are the head of trade in this region, and trade, I would say, must be second to financial services. And from that trade side, if we can get the logistics going, and just on the dry port, that's in danger right as we talk, because Customs is trying to put an act through Parliament that it actually deems City Deep, our inland port, just a container terminal, takes away its status, and that will be terribly damaging to OR Tambo Springs. They're trying to develop Pretcom and City Deep, and in fact we're not sure what the reasoning is. We're trying to halt it at Parliament through the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee, but it's a very important feature. These inland ports are a worldwide phenomenon. They work extremely well. Around Paris, I think there's 15 of them, and now they're trying to take away our status as one. So that would be very hurtful, and we hope that sense will prevail. But beyond that, we really should stay as the centre of trade of the region, SADC as well as the Sub-Saharan Africa. Most of our members are now starting to move into Africa, move their offices into Africa, which is quite interesting. And they're taking the Chinese and the Indian countries head on in some of the fields, medical, etc.
Where trade is such a big focus, Martyn, I mean, we've got a 103.7 million rand operating budget being allocated towards stimulating economic growth through labour-intensive industry specifically. There's quite a focus on SME development as well. What kind of work and progress are we actually seeing on that front?
The biggest challenge doesn't just apply to Johannesburg, obviously, it's every city in this part of the world and many others, will be tackling unemployment, particularly youth unemployment. Urbanization took place in Europe in the 19th century, 19th century, on the back of industrialization. What is urbanization? What is driving urbanization in Africa? It's not industrialization. It's perhaps failure and lack of opportunity in a rural economy. So the greatest challenge that our city will face is saying, how do we provide opportunity, be it educational, be it employment opportunity for young people going forward. Linking this to industrialization, services will never, perhaps with few exceptions, mop up the large amount of unemployment we have as a city, as a province, as a country, unfortunately. This can only be tackled really through true either industrialization, factory type jobs, blue collar type jobs, and there's nothing wrong with that at all, with the necessary technical skills supplying that, and secondly through entrepreneurial micro SME enterprise. I believe that the two obviously must be run in parallel, education opportunities, but secondly is creating a more entrepreneurial culture. This is cannot be directed by a state, it cannot be directed or enforced by a government. It only comes through liberalization. The role of a government in such trying times, be it city government or central government, as we live in today, with unemployment approaching 40%, is not regulation, it's liberalization. You know, and I often say, and half jokingly, capitalism is what people do when government leaves them alone.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And we've often had the conversation of let business do what they're good at and let government create a conducive enough business and operating environment for them to do their jobs. Let's take a look at this issue of skills, because there's a mention made of a commitment to addressing the issue of a skills mismatch between supply and demand through a skills hub. How much of a deterrent to investment has access to lack of skills been?
Well, on the skills situation, we, as I said, with that Imbizo we had with the former president, we talked about it as a second biggest challenge we had. Nothing much has been done to address it. The development of SMMEs and SMEs to become the growth employers of the which that's the way it has to be, hasn't taken off as it should. Pravin Gordhan, the Minister of Finance, said the other day he needs a plethora of incubators. The last few years we've been working with the city on an export development promotion program, as well as with the Gauteng province on a Plato mentorship program. Both of those have come to a bit of a halt, and they want us for private sector to do it. So we're working with private sector right now. That's my new role now, and setting up incubators in the city whereby obviously our strength is exports and trade, and we will continue what we did with the city program and try and train up SMEs to become good exporters like we did for the last 5 years, and somehow also mentor them by our membership, helping and maybe also getting their scorecards up, and somehow getting corporates to help us do that. Because if we don't do that, the corporates themselves aren't going to be the employers of the future. Martyn hit the nail on the head. It's going to be the SMEs. We've got to develop them. And they can't be survivalist businesses that we throw money at. It's got to be growth potential businesses. So whether we use BEE to partner the promising young upcoming emerging guys with successful white companies, together they must form the team that become this employer of the future and trade into Africa. Well,
from the conversation we've been having thus far, I mean, there's no lack of blueprints. We've got an abundance of them. Then the latest is the Growth and Development Strategy, GDS 2040, that's currently at play. A key indicator as to whether investors are convinced of these kind of blueprints and implementation of them would be the kind of investment we're currently seeing. I mean, what kind of investment flow are we seeing from foreign business, local business in the city of Johannesburg?
I think, you know, there's to what Keith said and what was said earlier, I think, you know, South Africa is a relatively slow growth economy in our own region. The opportunity the region provides, SADC, is 285 million people across 15 countries, and undoubtedly Johannesburg must be the services hub for that and the platform for expansion for that. The investment interest is most certainly there. We need agility from a policy-making perspective. We have any African city would kill to have what we have in Johannesburg. We have a fantastic city. Of course, there's some things need to be worked on. Crime, for example, safety and security is paramount importance. We cannot be a true world-class leading city until we fully address that. And that relates to the youth unemployment challenge and just general sort of, you know, management of softer issues perhaps beyond infrastructure. I think for me is moving forward is Johannesburg is needs to increasingly, and this is exactly the point, is we have a low trust political economy as a country. It's imperative that government and business work together, be at a country level, but in this case at a city level, to best improve that investment environment. We need to build that trust ultimately to underpin the vision we have as a city to ultimately to compete